Hello, and welcome to the Wild Blue Podcast, perspectives on aviation lives, lifestyles, and business.
Hi, and welcome to the Wild Blue Podcast. I'm sitting here with my trusty sidekick, Todd Mitten.
Is that now I'm your sidekick? Are we doing? You want to talk about airplanes today, Chris? You want to talk about we're running cattle on the ranch.
I had a few other things I was going to say, but I'll just keep those. No, but Todd and I thought it would be kind of fun to talk a little bit about the life and maybe some of the interesting, somewhat humorous, somewhat some of them are probably even not the most rational things that we do as as airline pilots to support our careers and that kind of thing. So anyway, Todd.
And it's kind of a wide topic, but there is certainly some interesting aspects to this job. Not talking about flying the airplanes, but talking about how it is going to work. We're both commuters. We can probably both tell some stories about how that business works out.
So explain that term. What's a commuter in the airline world?
A commuter, obviously, a commuter is a pilot or a flight attendant or any other that doesn't live where he or she is based. So in my case, I'm based in Dallas-Fort Worth. I live in the Kansas City area. And you're based in Minneapolis and obviously live in the Kansas City area too. So what that means is it's on our time. Well, maybe you guys at Brand X have a little better gig, but in general, it's on our time to get to work in our base and then be ready to fly our trip when the trip starts. The trip starts at 12 o'clock. We have to be in place before 12 o'clock. And so you have to plan your day really starting at your home. And we don't buy tickets. We're airline pilots. We're cheap. We fly for usually, in most airline cases, it's free, but it's standby. So there has to be a seat available or a jump seat.
Right, which is the cockpit jump seat. And then can you guys use the flight attendant jump seat if it's available?
No.
So we can do that.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, if a flight attendant is not using it,
yeah,
we can do that, which is nice because it allows somebody from another airline who needs a seat because they can't sit on the flight attendant jump seat. So we'll move back to a flight attendant jump seat and allow them to sit in the cockpit.
That's interesting.
So this is why I said one of the maybe less rational things we do, commuting. You have the option of either living in base. So every airline has a certain number of bases that their employees work out of, their pilots or flight attendants. And so they have a support structure there with a pilot's case. There's a chief pilot's office, an admin structure there, and then all your trips start and end there. And so where I am, we've got probably 6 or 7 of them. I don't know. There may be more than that now. I don't know. And so you just don't live there. You decide for whatever reason you don't want to live in base, which forces you to commute to work on 3 or 4 times a month when you go on a long trip. So what's the reason? What's your rationale for not living in base?
Well, I wouldn't get if I were living in Dallas-Fort Worth. I wouldn't get to hang out with you, Chris. That's the driving.
That was my answer.
That's a great question that I ask myself every day.
Every time you commute to work.
I can tell you that you are, as an airline pilot, far better off living where you can drive to your job and get on the airplane. You'll spend 20% less time involved in your job and make 20% more money than
because you're available for extra flying.
Exactly. But in our case, my wife has a job here. I spent 30 years in the Air National Guard in Missouri, so that was a good excuse. There's always been a reason to stay. Kansas City is a wonderful place to live too.
Great place to raise kids.
And so my kids are growing and gone. I'm running out of excuses not to move, so now I'm down to using you as an excuse.
So you've been commuting your whole.
I really have, yeah.
Your whole
career. I was hired at TWA in '96, yeah.
Yeah. See, and mine, I'm one of those guys who used to live in base, and then I chose to move out of base and commute. So I've been commuting the last, I guess it's going on 20 years now. But, I lived in base.
So do you have you got any good horror stories about commuting?
Todd, you know that. Yeah, so if you're getting on an airliner and, you see a pilot or a flight attendant in a uniform and they're going to the back of the plane, chances are that's what they're doing, is they're commuting to work. The other term here to use, and they're not really interchangeable, is deadheading. So you'll see a crew that's deadheading, and that's just a reposition. So they are on duty, and they're being moved from one location to another by the airline to facilitate a flight out of that other location typically. So you'll see, you may see a variety of crew members on an airplane. Some are deadheading, some are on their own time just going to work and commuting. So
key distinction there being the ones that are deadheading are getting compensated for that.
Yes, and they've got a seat. They've got a guaranteed seat.
Where those of us that are commuting, don't have a guaranteed seat and certainly are not being compensated either, because it's our own choice to live in a location other than where we're based.
Right. Yep.
I mean, and you never know the reason. It could even be something. There's plenty of stories of people who live in one base, but they want to fly at another base where they're more senior because they want to fly a wide-body airplane that's based maybe in New York and they can't hold it in Dallas.
They want to fly left seat where they can in a junior base.
Right.
Again, New York. New York always comes to mind because nobody wants to. No offense to anybody that's there, but we. In the airline world, very few people live there. The cost of living is very high, so the seniority in the New York bases for all the majors is very junior.
Very junior.
The senior people will get out as quick as they can, typically.
That is absolutely correct. I asked you about some horror stories or whatever, and I, for the most part, as often as we do commute, I suppose it does work out most of the time. I have, knock on wood, I have never missed a trip due to commuting. And
that's good, because I have.
Yeah, most people have. I don't know how I've managed to avoid that.
Yeah.
I can tell you I've had some crazy scenarios. I remember flying, this one, I was actually furloughed from DFW base Brand X, and I was flying on Southwest. I was with American Eagle. We had flown back as a captain on a regional jet there. This was in probably 2006 or something, and the winds were howling in Dallas, and it's one of those rare times on the 3-1s at Dallas Fort Worth. They can't even use the north-south runways because the winds were so strong out of the west, exceeding crosswind limits. So they have to use 3-1, and then they had such a dust storm going that the airplanes were diverting, and to include Love Field. And I was actually riding on South. American's flight was canceled. I was riding on Southwest to Love Field, and I was going to go over to Dallas Fort Worth to fly my trip. Well, we diverted on the Southwest flight to Austin. So now I'm in Austin, and it's still not time for my sign-in for my trip. And I walk down to the American Airlines operation and see that I overhear there's an Eagle flight because a bunch of American Airlines airplanes had diverted to Austin. Again, Dallas Fort Worth was a mess. And I end up riding on this ferried American Eagle flight up to Dallas Fort Worth, and I made my trip after all this. I mean, crazy. Divert to Austin and still make it.
And you were going to have to take a car or some kind of ground transportation over to DFW, so it probably didn't cost you all that much extra time, did it?
No, it worked out great. Yeah, you're exactly right, because it didn't wait very long, and they had, for a while, Dallas Fort Worth and Love Field, I think, were closed, which, of course, works in my favor, too.
Yeah.
I had another one I got to tell real quick that was a lucky, just came to mind. It was quite a thrill for me. I was a new hire at TWA in 1996, and I was New York based, go figure, brand new, for a few months as a 727 flight engineer. And I finished a trip, it might have been IOE. I might have literally just finished my initial operating experience as a 727 flight engineer and gotten signed off by the instructor. So now I was at Kennedy, and those of you that are familiar with the LaGuardia is the kind of the domestic airport. Kennedy, certainly there's more domestic flying than there used to be out of Kennedy, but it was kind of limited. And I overheard someone in TWA operations commenting that TWA was ferrying a 747 from Kennedy to St. Louis in an hour or two or something. And so, lo and behold, I was able to commute to St. Louis, and then, of course, on to Kansas City where I lived. But out of Kennedy on an empty 747, which I chose to ride in the cockpit because I had never flown.
Right.
It's the only time I ever did, I guess, a Lufthansa years ago. But it's the only time I ever got to ride in the cockpit of a 747. And that was a pretty neat experience.
Yeah.
Another successful commute.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sometimes, like you said, sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. And I've missed a trip before. We had a policy that was called call in honest. So the way it worked is you had to have a primary flight and a backup flight on planned for your commute.
Right,
so
right.
You couldn't,
Yep.
just because you're flying standby, you just couldn't take the last flight that got you in 2 minutes before sign in,
Right.
and be okay there. I mean, you could theoretically, but if you didn't have a backup, then I think the backup, I think it had a time frame. I think it was 2 hours or an hour or something. So you're getting to work pretty early, and on that occasion, it was both of them went away. I think it was one here in Kansas City canceled. And then the next one, and I think it was maybe Southwest, and I think they ended up delayed. I think it was all weather related, and so here I am stuck, can't get to work, and so it was a no harm, no foul type of situation. Nobody wants to miss, going to work.
No.
And it's all about communication. But,
And normally, then you're expected to be still attempting to get to work.
you're still attempting to get to work.
Right, but you just don't get penalized for missing the
And
trip.
for me, it's 6.5 hour drive, and I've done that drive before, but that's a last resort on all respects because it's 6.5 hours. I mean, you don't usually have that much time. You're not getting, it's an hour flight. I can still get up there 3 or 4 hours prior. So there's a lot of extra sit around time. People will say, well, my gosh, you do that, but then invariably it's the guy that commutes 45 minutes to work every day each way in traffic. And I said, okay, let's do the math here.
Right.
You're sitting in your car 45 minutes every day, minimally, and you can't do anything. I mean, there's very little you can do while you're there. At least while I'm doing it, I can sleep, or I can knock out some work, or I can do something that's productive. So it's not ideal. And my reasoning for it was I wanted to be here for close to the kids' family. That's why we moved back up here. We started having kids, and we wanted them to be close to the family. As it turns out, they either died or they moved away. So now here we are, pretty much the only ones in the family left around here. So
At least your kids are still in the area. Only half of mine are.
Yeah. So
there's some commuting success stories though too, and I just happen to have one and by commuting success stories, and this is the best feeling, and we all who commute know this. Every once in a while, there's no way you're going to get home, or you're going to end up having to spend the night at your base, or something is going on that is makes it just like, well, this is not going to work out today. And then lo and behold, the seas part, and whether it's the flight was oversold, and now suddenly another flight misconnected, and you're getting a first class seat, or whether it's a case of the flight that you were the last flight of the night, and this just happened to me. The last flight of the night was delayed about 50 minutes, and I arrived. I literally blocked in from my flight that I operated exactly 30 minutes after the scheduled departure of the last flight from Dallas-Fort Worth to Kansas City, and that last flight was still there, and I ran down the hall and made the flight and rode in the cockpit and made it home and you feel like you've won the lottery.
Yep.
You really do.
It's like that, you get one good shot while you're out golfing and it brings you back.
That's a great analogy. It's a great analogy because then you said, "Oh, this commuting's not so bad."
Yeah.
Of course, then I waited. I missed the employee bus at MCI. By the way, I didn't tell you that. By probably 2 minutes, I was standing there with another pilot, and he and I had got off that flight that we commuted in on. And then to catch the employee bus at night, it only runs every half hour at the employee lot. And we must have just missed it because we stood there for 28 minutes out in the cold waiting on it.
Well, to see, that's the difference between you and me, Todd, is that I subscribe to the princess parking theory, and what princess parking is my wife brings me, she drops me off right there at the front door, and then she's right there picking me up.
I wish she'd pick me up once in a while. That is the way to do it. So while we're commuting, sometimes we end up in conversations with passengers, other people, whether they have an interest in aviation. I don't mind people asking questions if they're curious about flying or aviation or something. I don't run into that a lot, though. Do you? I mean, where people are curious about aviation anymore?
Not so much. People are so much to themselves. I mean, with the advent of the screens on the back of the seats,
or your phone,
or your phone, yeah, and it's you can almost always tell when you sit down whether the person next to you is going to want to talk or not. And sometimes they're just nervous, and I get that. But it's funny because I've had my Bose headsets on, and then I get a little ringing of the ear, so I keep my those yellow earplugs in. So I've got both of them on, and sometimes people will see me put them both on, and then they'll strike up the conversation. And so, like, okay, that's fine. I'm not trying to be antisocial necessarily. Sometimes. But usually it's just, I just tired of the noise.
I thought your mask said, "Don't talk to me."
Yeah, right. Yes. So you do get that. Have you ever thrown a fellow pilot under the bus? I've had fun with this with somebody I've known where, they've gone back and they're walking back there, and I'll make a PA that, hey, if you have any questions, Captain so-and-so sitting in seat so-and-so is happy to answer them.
Oh, I need to do that next time. I think of a couple people that you and I both know that I will do that too. Mm-hmm. I think that'd be a classic. That's kind of fun, little things like that. Like if I know the flight attendants are overhearing a jump seater that's they're just kind of eavesdropping on the jump seater conversation, I'll just say a little bit louder, would you go back there and make sure you're testing that flight attendant call button a couple times for me? Just to make sure it works. Those are good ideas. I need to incorporate.
Yeah, but you get that. You'll sit back there, and of course now my last name is Kirk, right? So Captain Kirk. So I get all of the Captain Kirk stuff, and I've actually even stopped on my main jacket wearing a name tag on it because invariably I'll see some guy. Well, this happened not too long ago. I was walking through first class. There's these two guys right there at the bulkhead. And they start kind of talking and snickering, and they keep looking at me. And I like messing with people a little bit. And so I looked at them both. They weren't acknowledging me necessarily. And I looked at them both. I said, "I know what you're talking about. And trust me, it's not original. I've heard it before." And they and they just start laughing.
Yeah, we hear certain things because we've talked about it, and airline pilots will talk about things that the common lines you'll hear when you're walking to the back of the airplane for your commute flight. Probably the most common is, "Well, shouldn't you be flying the airplane?" Or, "What are you doing back here?" Or, "Boy, I guess it's safe because you're here."
Because you're here, yeah.
And it's the same. I think we all hear the same.
Yep.
The same.
Or you'll see, you ever sense that, you start getting into some rough weather or some, and you'll feel the eyes start looking at you to see how you react.
Yes.
Sometimes I think it might be kind of fun just to overreact, but I'm like, nope, just try to.
What sort of questions have you been asked?
The standard ones. What's your route? What
route
route do you fly?
Route do you fly?
Well, I'm the Kansas City to Minneapolis pilot. But that's what I want to say,
folks. We shouldn't, because we probably have listeners who don't realize that what we, as airline pilots, you fly a particular airplane. Where the airline chooses to fly that particular airplane is up to the airline. We're qualified with a few nuances. Certain, like mountain airports, maybe you have to have a special checkout. But in general, once you're checked out on an airplane, you're qualified to fly it to any airport that airline serves. So we don't fly a, quote, route. That's, I think, must be more of a train or truck driver or something.
I don't know. And I think way back when, when they actually had routes that were named,
Maybe, yeah.
But yeah, I'm on the 737. We fly all North America. I'll go, Anchorage. We don't do much Canada on it, but we do a lot of Caribbean. Like this weekend, I'm going to be down in Costa Rica. And so our map is pretty wide as far as that airplane goes. And you're on the 320, and so
same thing.
Did
I tell you a bit international?
You did,
yeah. So we'll see if I get that. Right now it's domestic U.S., Canada, and Mexico, and then I've just put in a request at the airline to fly. We use it on some international routes to the northern part of South America, as well as Central America and the Caribbean, and they consider that international. Eventually, as we get additional newer versions of the A321, then we're going to fly that to Europe, hopefully.
Yeah.
Oh, we do fly them right now to west coast of Hawaii.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we were doing that for a while on the 900. That was kind of an oversell job by Boeing, I think, on the capabilities of the airplane.
Yeah.
It lasted for a while, but not for a long while.
That makes me nervous too about the possibilities of the XLR. Will it meet what Airbus says it will do? If it does, it's gonna be fantastic.
Well, they've never manufacturers have never oversold the capabilities of an airplane.
No. Our listeners probably know that as
yeah. Hey, let's put the top speed in miles an hour because it sounds better.
Yeah, exactly.
That's marketing.
So, what other little oddities are there to our job that aren't actually our job? We do show. What do you do at the airport? You mentioned getting a little work done or whatever when you're killing time prior to your actual trip, or even you get a delay, like you're midway through your trip and you had what you thought was an hour turn in Salt Lake City that, no, it's going to be 3 hours.
Right. Well, and so what happens is, and I think some people think that, if we've got there's a delay going on and maybe we know about it ahead of time, and they'll see us walk up at the last minute. They're like, oh, it was those guys. Well, no, we've got an ops section at every airport, most airports anyway. At least we have a base there where we can be down there, kind of watching what's going on with the delay, keeping track of it. You're checking weather, you're doing all these other things as well. And then there's just there's a place to go relax and read a book or take a nap or grab a bite to eat or whatever.
Right.
And I typically do a lot of wild blue work when I'm sitting around, because I don't like just sitting. I like to be active and doing something. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly. Like I like to do the same thing. I go to, as you described it, an ops area it's for the pilots or crew members, and depending on the airport, some of them are kind of exclusively pilots. Some of them are all crew members. So that's one way to get a little respite, because we're in these airports a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not just, a couple flights a year or something. I know there's some business travelers that fly, very, very, very regularly, but on average we fly more than most people, almost everyone. So it's kind of nice to just get out of that airport.
And I sympathize with the business travelers who are there a lot, because I personally, up in the terminal area, I find it to be an extremely fatiguing environment. The incessant messaging that goes on, the constant, the PAs about this and that and everything else. And then you go to some of these airports and they've got the beeping carts, and it's just like you can't. It's hard to make a phone call.
It is.
You can't hardly get on the phone and do anything because everybody's talking, and and they're telling you about the TSA rules and requirements and the masks, and everybody's heard it a gazillion times.
And now they've gone. I notice in some places the local politicians are using that forum to promote. Essentially, I feel, to promote themselves. Hello, I'm Mayor so-and-so, mayor of the blankety-blank city, and I want to welcome you to our city. We're glad you're here. And by the way, wear your mask, or whatever it may be. So,
you know what I find funny about that? Because you hit the nail on the head there. So, Atlanta, I'll call out Atlanta because they do that. The last 3 mayors' message has been the same, which tells me there ain't a stitch of originality amongst any of those politicians. It's just the same song and dance, and I'm like, come on. We don't, yes, for the traveler that goes through that airport once a year, fantastic. But the rest of us, frankly, we're sick and tired of hearing it, from employees to seasoned travelers. And it would be so nice to have a place where you could just, and it's hard, and that's why we go to these ops places.
Well, I do think this is why seasoned travelers feel it's worth the money to join these clubs, whether it's the actual airline club, Admirals Club at America, and I'm sure what's Delta
Sky Club,
Sky Rock Stars, whatever.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great idea, and then some. There's even these credit card ones,
right?
American Express and so on have a club, and just to get out of that. Your comment was great. Fatiguing is exactly right. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but that's exactly what it is. It just beats you down after a while, and it's so nice to get a little respite from that. Of course, if you're retired military or currently serving, the USO at a lot of airports is a great. There's such nice people that work in the USO and volunteering their time. I really appreciate that organization. And getting out of that environment's important. What else?
Well, something just to give you a little, you're trying to just shed a little light on the inside operations questions that we get. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that pilots and flight attendants both, we don't start getting paid until that door is closed on that airplane. So, and I think every airline's a little bit different, but in our case, the beacon's got to be on, and I've got to release the brakes, and that's what trips the thing. So all the stuff that we're doing ahead of time, we're not getting paid for. We're not getting paid for any of the, reviewing the flight plan, looking at the weather,
pre-flighting the airplane,
briefing the flight attendants, dealing with passenger issues, all that kind of stuff. And then the same thing, as soon as we block in, as soon as that door opens, boom, that clock stops, and that's when we stop getting paid. So, sometimes people will ask questions about that.
No, I think that's a great point, and we are. It might explain why people want to go hide. Although most of us appreciate, and we do represent the company that we work for, and try to take the time to answer questions, and even laugh with the guy that's telling the joke that we've heard 100 times. But hey, that's all right. That's the way it is. And I have a question. Where is the tarmac?
That is an elusive place. The tarmac. We were sitting out there on the tarmac.
Yeah. And of course, another one is we don't. And many of our listeners are pilots. I think we don't, quote, sit on the runway for 30 minutes waiting on a gate, as that would pretty well shut down the rest of the airport while we sat on the runway. Or we were circling the airport.
Yeah. I'm not sure I've ever circled in, 16,000 hours of flying. I'm not sure I've ever circled the airport.
How about that one flight I was on, we dropped 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
When we hit that turbulence, so we must have dropped 1,000 feet. There's some funny ones that we've all heard.
Yeah, I kind of have a slightly tongue-in-cheek thing I'll talk to people about and say, we're flying around these airliners. We've got 100 and some odd experts sitting in the back.
Yes.
That they're all sure that we are not telling them the truth, or and in some cases, frankly, that's probably the case. But most of the time, we're just we're telling you what we know, which oftentimes is somewhat limited.
Yep.
We're not getting all the information either, and that's trust me, that's as frustrating to me as it is to you, because you don't have 180 sets of eyeballs looking at you trying to figure out what the hey is this guy doing. Sometimes we just don't have it all, and sometimes it's because I think one of the more frustrating things is the FAA a lot of times doesn't share a lot of that information on delays. For the life of me, I cannot figure out why. I can't get a takeoff time until I push back, and then they won't tell you that until you push back, and then oh, by the way, you've got a 30-minute delay. How about telling me that ahead of time so I can not board this airplane and let people be comfortable?
You'll hear people use the term, pilots use the term EDCT or edict, estimated departure clearance time.
Yes,
So
but we don't get those until you push off. They want to see movement of that airplane, but that's frustrating, because you got everybody in there. It's a captive audience, and nobody wants to be there.
But I got to tell you, at the end of the day, I enjoy taxiing the airplane around. I enjoy pushing the throttles forward. I'm sorry, they're thrust levers in the Airbus. I enjoy landings. It's all fun. So
yeah.
I enjoy working with the people I work with for the most part. Most of them are great. So
yeah, they are. There's a good cadre of people,
and the passengers. It's fun to develop a momentary rapport with somebody, share a laugh, joke about their if they're wearing a college T-shirt or something like that, you can act like I've never heard of that school or whatever it may be. That just and people do appreciate, I think, the personalizing of it.
Yes,
so
they do, and again, most people are. Most of the people are very, very good. You get the few that aren't. So that leads to the next question. I get this question all the time. Have you had to kick anybody off the airplane lately?
Yes.
Yes,
that's become a new one. Yes, that's people think it's like a free-for-all up there right now. Over the past 2 years, we were really heavily into COVID, and people think it was a like literally there were fights breaking out on every airplane.
Yeah. Now I think I shared this with last week. I was I was on a paid ticket on another airline going out to California to visit with a client, and we're sitting out there for the longest time sitting on the runway. We're sitting out there on the tarmac. We were out there in the just holding short of the runway, and finally it came to light that we were having a passenger issue in the back, and we taxied. They taxied the airplane back in and got that guy got off the plane. And he was muttering some kind of crap on his way out. But
better them than us. Though.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever had to throw anything. I've had to lay down the law a couple of times. Which usually is enough.
Yeah.
And we can just all go about our day because nobody wants to. It just drives me nuts the thought of one person inconveniencing 100 and some odd other people.
Exactly.
And that's just patently unfair to the rest of the passengers.
And you don't want to just, you need to show that you mean business, but conversely, really at the end of the day, everybody's going to lose. It's going to cost us, even us as pilots, time, because it means a shorter layover or missing your commuter flight home or whatever.
Right.
So we don't want that. Nobody wants that. If you can diffuse it and let it go, then just let it go. If you can.
Catching that commuter flight home, maybe we can kind of wrap things up here. But I was thinking, so I'm sure if you pulled all the data, that last leg of the trip, for some odd reason, those legs seem to be flown the fastest.
It's just crazy how that works. It's almost like the people who are pushing the power up have control of the early arrival.
Yeah, because you might have a commuter on board that is trying to catch a flight. So, this is one of these stories. You might have heard it too, but I was flying with a guy one time, and he told me that this is the way the captain responded. a message came across ACARS, how come you're flying at, let's say it was 0.8 when the planned program speed might have been 0.76 or something. The dispatcher's seeing this.
Right.
And then the captain responds, because this thing won't go 0.9.
Yeah, that's a fact. Well, it's a fun topic. I hope you guys found this interesting. Just something we could banter back and forth about. That obviously, Chris and I enjoy our airline careers, and we certainly enjoy talking to pilots, talking to aircraft owners, helping those who are looking for airplanes, and helping those who are looking to sell an airplane. So if you have any questions for us, feel free to give us a call, 888-773-4249, or look us up on the web at flywildblue.com.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Blue Podcast. Find us online at flywildblue.com. And don't forget to subscribe and share.